During the week that he spent travelling back to work, Papa felt that he was returning to the end of the world. He had never felt this contrast so strongly before. The savannah was so far removed from all civilization. The recent experiences with his father had marked him profoundly, and he was left with a great feeling of contentment. Day by day, men came from far and wide to work on the construction of the road. The work was becoming more and more popular. The salary had increased a little, and the food had improved. Papa set up a first aid tent, which made it much easier for the people to be treated in privacy. Inside he placed the precious wooden box of medicines that he had brought from my grandpa's pharmacy. In addition, a couple of camp beds were specially made from cane and canvas on which he treated his patients. Medical records were saved in an improvised leather bag. Thousands of birds were mating and nesting. The macaws were showing off their wonderful, vibrant plumage and were performing their dance of love. Once partnered with their chosen one, they remained together for life. A couple of scarlet macaws caught the attention of my father as they sat in the tree nearest to his tent. Every afternoon he loved to give them bananas. Over time, these wonderful birds came to recognize my father, and as soon as they saw him coming, they slid down from the tree to expectantly await their treat. Their beaks were quite terrifying, but it didn't take long before they climbed onto my papa's arm, where he fed them as if they were his pets. The new road attracted many traders and businesses to the territory. Some foreigners even pitched their tents among those of the road workers for a few days. It was a very strange experience for the workers, not ever having seen and heard people speaking languages they did not understand. These foreigners were accompanied by a local guide. He was by no means an expert, but was nonetheless well paid. The workers realized that these people were hunting and capturing enormous numbers of parrots, birds, and macaws, and then transporting them under terrible conditions to where they were sold. Many of these animals did not even survive the journey. The guide said, "These birds are so lucky because they will end up living in a lovely house in a foreign country where their owners will feed them well. No longer a life of struggling to find food and enduring the bad weather that they have here." How little these people understand these animals, Papa thought. He believed in the natural balance of the animal kingdom and its ability to survive in its own environment, even in such terrible weather. These mesmerizing birds had their home in this beautiful land. They could fly over vast expanses under the blue sky, enjoying their freedom. To remove them from their natural environment was dreadful, especially in such awful conditions. They were packed into big sacks as if they were potatoes and transported in cages over land and then by river for many days. Eventually, they arrived in the United States of America, where they were sold to pet shops. The birds were traumatized. Their precious wings were cut to prevent them from flying, and their feathers sold as souvenirs. If they were lucky, their new owners treated them well. However, birds exposed to such trauma looked depressed, and sometimes were aggressive, which made their owners dislike them. Many thousands of birds had been stolen over many years. There were no laws against this, and people did as they pleased with the birds and animals. It is only since then that a commission has been established to protect endangered species and animals in the wild. The people of the plains felt disempowered from preventing this cruelty, but in retaliation for the devastation, the workers on the road composed a song that they sang all the time, and which became very popular in the region. It went like this. We parrots are talkative creatures who prefer to remain in the trees and be free, free, free. Luxurious houses are for the rich. Go, go, go. They are just a jail. Hell, hell, hell. Leave us alone, alone, and go far, far away. The couple of scarlet macaws that Papa had befriended were safe and sound. He called them in the morning, offering them the usual treat of bananas, and as soon as they climbed onto his arm, he took them with him to his place of work at the new road. In this way, the two beautiful macaws escaped the plague of hunters. Surprisingly enough, after a few months, 3 lovely chicks were hatched by the macaws. My father's heart was filled with happiness. When the moon was full, the light that flooded down was almost as bright as daylight. During these times, the workers stayed awake until midnight, and Papa took the opportunity to read them some passages of the famous book Doña Barbara, a novel by the writer Romulo Gallegos, first published in 1929. The novel was set on the plains of Venezuela. It was about the life of a rancher, a very rich and powerful woman. Surrounded by fireflies, the workers listened intently to the story. It was as if their own lives were being described in the novel. After all, the savanna of Venezuela and Colombia was the same, sharing the same rivers that ran across both countries, the same culture, manners, and colloquialisms, the same music and food. Doña Barbara's life was full of contradictions. She was an intrepid woman in this most wild of lands. She was wicked, greedy, and resentful. When she was a young woman, a gang of men had abused her, and for this reason she took indiscriminate revenge, even on her own daughter and son-in-law, clearly resenting them for being in love. Doña Barbara had been living a life of inflicting heart-rending cruelty, but eventually, moved by a feeling of repentance, she begged her daughter for forgiveness. In the aftermath, she bequeathed all her fortune to her daughter and returned what she had stolen from people. Then she disappeared and was never heard of again. At the end of the story, the workers whispered, "Remorse, remorse." And my father added, "And we can all learn from stories such as these how to live a better life." In his novel, Gallegos recreated the marvellous savannah with its wildlife, animals, and the rough life of the ranchers, but above all, the corruption, the intriguing lives of the people, their suffering, and the deepest feelings of human beings. Romulo Gallegos won many prizes for this novel and recognition from all over the world. Despite this, he was forced to flee from Venezuela because he had dared to criticize the military regime in power at the time. He took refuge in Spain, then in Cuba, then in Mexico. Eventually, he returned to Venezuela, whereupon he was elected president for a short period. How strangely life turns round. The workers building the road had been touched by this wonderful story, and they dreamt under the moonlight of the most powerful female rancher of all time, Doña Barbara.